Come on, June, you can make it. June sends me this email. It's like, I threw my back out. Please don't tease me. Don't call me out on stage or anything like that. So I promise I won't. Anyway, so we wanted to wrap up the morning with kind of our strategic growth showcase. And typically what we've done in the past is we've tried to design a session that really helps brands understand the kind of maturity curve. And often we'll find, especially in LA, that we get a lot of newer brands. They're newer to international. You know, actually had a couple of folks up here that are just starting their international journey. But it's also really important to understand kind of where you go next. And some of you may recognize June. She's been one of our most loyal speakers. And she's brought a lot of people to Gal. So, you know, June, I hope that I won't stiffen your back with kind of a stiff moderation here. Joy is new to the stage. I had a great time. Met her at one of our dinners back in October. We're going to hear about the Ritual journey, and I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves. But I want to give a special shout out to Ahmed. He's been with us from the beginning. He's heard me mess up on stage more than just about anybody in the Gulf community. And he's going to walk us through some research, kind of like we did with the last one, where we want to keep talking about, you can't scale the customer experience or the customer engagement internationally without kind of understanding what that customer looks like. So he's going to open up with some slides. So why don't we do this? Joy, why don't you say a quick hello, tell us a little bit about, kind of your background, a little bit of where you guys are selling, but we'll kind of hold off on the international journey. And then June, you can give us a little bit of the same, and then I'll kind of bounce it over to Ahmed, and he can walk us through some slides, and then we'll get the conversation going.
Sure. So I head now Strategy and Business Affairs. My title just changed earlier this year, but I've been at Ritual for the past 4 years working on business development and international. So anything we do that's new, from new channels to new markets, strategic partnerships, basically trying to meet our consumers where they are, or our customers wherever they are. And it's been a really fun and wild journey going international in the past 2 years.
Great. June?
Awesome. Hi, I'm June. I did throw out my back, so if I'm sitting weird, I don't have great posture.
She's going to remind me to keep my posture. I won't slouch.
I am head of sales and ops at Bala. I've been with the brand for a year. Prior to that, I was at Manduka for about 12 and a half years. So I've been here a couple times now and glad to be back.
I'm going to pass this down. Ahmed, why don't you say hello, and then I'll let you drive us through some of the slides, kind of set the tone for some of the data slides.
So I'm Ahmed Naeem, Chief Commercial Officer for ESW. Been with the company really since its founding in 2010. Been part of the Gulf community since its founding in 2014. And I've worked with hundreds of brands, have spoken to thousands of brands that are going global. So I really wanted, and the Gulf team kind of wanted me to share some key insights before we go into the actual journeys of my panelists there from an international perspective. But what I was asked to do was kind of talk through, as the topic is really where, when, and how to look at global. The when is 10 years ago, so if you're not doing it already, you really need to jump on it. But where I'm going to be pulling a lot of data from as I talk through some of the findings is some of the brands we work with, and we're driving direct-to-consumer for some of the most known brands. We work with small and large brands, but we're trading close to $2 billion of international GMV through this. So that's kind of an avenue of where we're pulling some insights across multiple categories. There's also a survey that we run twice a year, and I presented the June results in the New York Gulf, and we took another survey in November with over 16,000 respondents from all of these markets, and kind of the data we're seeing there and where consumer sentiment sits. So first, I think as we look at the where, I wanted to share some of the growth rates by market. What we typically categorize as different phases of markets, and as you look at really optimizing your international and direct-to-consumer, there's the large, mature, and more simple markets. Simple for U.S. brands, essentially in that they're, you can have an English website and still trade effectively in some of these markets. 2020 and 2021, we were seeing triple-digit growths. 2022 slowed down, but was still quite strong from an international perspective as you compare that to domestic across our client base, where certain markets like Canada were still growing. Germany was still growing quite significantly. The UK did slow down, but was still quite positive. Brands tend to typically start with these markets as far as a main focus, and then kind of look at additional large, mature, but more complex markets as you look at Asian markets. Seeing better growth rate there than on average than what we were seeing in Europe and the UK primarily. Still quite strong. But as brands continue that journey and look at where there's real growth metrics, the emerging markets are just continued to do really well in what was a challenging year, I think, for most last year. So coming off of record numbers for most online retailers, it slowed down last year. Where it didn't slow down was in the emerging markets. As you look at Mexico, as you look at UAE and Saudi, to a lot of what the panelists were speaking through today, just very strong. India is growing quite rapidly there. So as you look at where to go, obviously you want to look at what you can do from a simplicity perspective, what markets you could focus on, and then layer on services and capabilities there. From what we've seen, I think when we look at it from a category perspective, luxury goods were pretty much unimpacted by the economic concerns, growing significantly. Footwear has been doing really well as well for us as a category. Beauty and wellness is done well. And then as you look down there, apparel primarily was probably the biggest lag last year as far as category. But the lifestyle brands, where we kind of catch all for all types of other brands, doing quite well. So when you take a look at the category as well, this is important, and this varies slightly from country to country. So looking at that, and we have some great data that we can share with prospective clients on this, understanding what markets to focus on within the cohort of the growth markets, and really doubling down on those markets based on specific category growth. And we know the Middle East, for example, and the luxury goods just continues to grow. When we look at the survey now of the respondents, we actually asked if there's going to be changes to their habits over the next 12 months of buying online. And the good news is less than 15% said that they're looking to decrease their shopping behavior or spend. When we did this survey 6 months ago, when we presented it, it was at 32%. So for what that's worth, at least it's trending in the right way from a consumer sentiment perspective. But consistent with the growth rates we're seeing, the respondents in India, UAE, Mexico, and South Africa led. South Africa kind of surprised us, but Mexico, UAE, and India didn't. We're leading that charge in saying they will increase, right? Much higher than any of the other markets. Now, when you take a look at how do you want to grow international, we work with all size brands. We've taken customers that we've had on our solution for going on 9 years, 10 years now. A lot of brands will start cross-border, work towards a hybrid and then a local model. Some do this right out of the gate if they have the demand. Others, we take them on that journey. But I think the important things as you look at how to go international, number one, focus on the right markets. If anyone's telling you to do 200 right away, you're going to probably be doing 100 really badly. And that's not going to add value, or not really going to build your brand equity. Inventory is important to optimize. So for when you're starting, the cross-border makes sense. One single inventory pool. And that's where that cross-border model really works. You test, you learn, you do cross-border, you do basic localization like some of the other providers may have in payments and basics in the checkout. And you may have limited marketing investment just to English or just to certain markets. That's a good approach to take into the phase 1 and the phase 2 markets that we laid out. But as you really want to grow that business and that market, that's where deeper localization is important. That's where looking at moving inventory in region or country is going to be important. From not just driving growth, but optimizing your margin, right? Getting inventory there is going to reduce shipping costs by 30%. It's going to reduce return costs. It's going to get faster to consumers, it's going to be more sustainable. So there's a lot of advantages there. This is where you can also start doing a lot more strategic marketing in that region when you're kind of there closer and may want to look at that piece as in the hybrid model. And then as we've grown brands, we've really helped them go into a full local model. Top churning SKUs are sitting in country with the rest of the catalog coming cross-border, so they're not limiting that. Looking at local app integrations, omni-channel integrations, really unique and exclusive drops that can be serviced to that local audience. How it integrates with any partners or strategic distributors they may have there, looking at more country-specific loyalty and rewards, and then having a strong social presence. As you really grow a market, you have to invest in marketing. And that's an area that we've helped brands that we operate with in that area as well. And to have a strong social presence, I think when we take a look at that survey that we gave, it is quite strong in certain channels, but these channels change by country. So when you're working in a strategy for a country, when you're working with a partner, really look at each country on its own or leverage a partner that knows the capabilities of each country on its own, because it's going to vary where you may want to be putting some of your dollars and getting the best ROI. I think of no surprise to anyone amongst the younger community, the TikTok increase is just, I mean, it's gaining on everybody and gaining quickly. And if we looked at specific markets, it's actually number one in certain regions. So understand that piece, look at the inventory, positioning, how you manage that, the marketing. As you really grow your business and you start in that, those simpler markets and then evolve into some of the larger growth but more complex markets, these are some of the key things in the how that you really want to keep in mind.
And you guys update this study pretty regularly, right?
Yeah, we do it twice a year.
Okay.
And track how things are going, and that's where, we went down from 31% to 15% of those looking
that's
to
a
decrease
crazy
spending,
change.
which is hopefully that trend continues, and we see that in H1 of this year.
So I wanted to map kind of these stories to the framework, so thank you for that. Joy, let's start, kind of go back to the tried and true markets and walk us through a little bit, because I know you guys, not unlike a lot of folks, started with Canada and UK. You found some very interesting differences. And yet China was also in the picture right out of the gate for you guys. So walk us through a little bit, kind of how you went about looking at the markets. What were some of the key drivers as far as, the market selection, kind of where you went?
Yeah, so for us, there was an additional layer of complexity that was regulatory. Because we are a vitamin and supplements product, we had to figure out where we could sell the products without meaningfully changing the formulations or changing the formulations at all, and where we could sell the products without doing a lot of work to the labels and essentially creating a separate set of SKUs for a different market. So what we first looked at was really, what does the regulatory environment look like in certain markets that we were interested in, based on size, based on consumer behavior, based on e-commerce behavior, subscription behavior, because our website, direct-to-consumer website, is subscription only. And then we looked at, okay, from a market standpoint, these are the markets we're interested in. From a regulatory standpoint, which are the markets that would allow for us to ship cross-border the products and the SKUs that we were selling in the US as they are. And our thought was, we want to test out these markets, understand how much demand there is there before investing a significant amount into marketing in these markets. So if you looked back at Ahmed's slides, we are very much in the cross-border stage. And we started with Canada because we already knew that there was, probably like many direct-to-consumer brands in the US, we knew that there was an audience out there that was receiving our marketing. The marketing was bleeding cross-border when it comes to social media, podcasts, really like newsletters, anything we were doing that had a digital reach. We were already targeting a certain percentage of Canadian consumers. And we saw actually in performance that Canada outperformed even our initial projections. And it was very encouraging to know that we could spend no real additional dollars and get incremental customers and incremental dollars very easily. China, so the UK was a similar story, but we actually saw the UK perform less well than Canada did. There's a little bit less bleeding of marketing into the UK. They have their own ecosystem of brands. They don't reach across the Atlantic Ocean as much as Canadians do across the border. China was always interesting for us because it was such a big market for supplements. China is the second largest market for supplements in the world, second only to the US, and it's growing a lot faster than the US was. And because of everything that Tmall has done, Tmall had a cross-border business, Tmall Global, where a lot of supplement brands were actually selling their US or local products without having to reformulate, get approval from the Chinese FDA, or put new labels or formulations on it. So for us, there were three criteria. One was the market size, consumer behavior. The second was regulatory. And then the third became logistics. How could we get the product there in an easy way without a huge amount of lift for our operations team?
Yeah, and I'll come back in a second, just that whole difference in the UK and Canada. I think a lot of people lump the English-speaking markets and say, we can kind of cookie cutter these. That didn't work. But June, tell us a little bit, and feel free to bring in some of the Manduka story as well. But I know Bala's relatively new to the international journey, but kind of reflecting back on even the opening session, a lot of what you're looking at is D2C, and June was the one that coined D2C plus. So we're gonna make that word happen. But tell us a little bit about this D2C plus, the way you guys are looking at it.
Yeah, I think when we had this prep call for the panel, we were discussing so many brands who are D2C over the last year or so realized, oh shoot, we have to be wholesale and retail focused now that our costs are going up. I think that's what Kent is referring to. And so, luckily for Bala, we've always kind of looked at more than just D2C. And that's part of the reason why I joined the team was we had a really big lift from our retail partners, both from US and globally, especially in Europe, being able to partner with brands like retailers like Harrods and et cetera, really helps you get your name out there, especially in a region where you're not as well known, and they're really the ambassadors for you with the offline marketing presence.
So the whole idea of kind of building the brand, that was again something that we talked about in the opening session, and looking at these, we're looking at the cost effectiveness of getting brands in front of people through other retail channel partners and things like that. Are you seeing any difference as you kind of look for the distribution partners in Asia, where you've had a lot of experience in the past, versus maybe some of the high end, the high street stores in the UK that you were talking about?
Definitely a lot of difference in terms of red tape and also getting in the stores themselves. Luckily, with Europe, we have a wholesale distributor who's actually working with us across the Western Europe region, and they had connections that we were able to leverage for us to be in already. In terms of Asia, I think that because the e-com shopping is so advanced and preferred, that the impact of retailers kind of come almost secondary. And so it's kind of done in different steps, I would say.
Got it. I want to pivot a little bit back to China and Asia. You guys have recently, Joy, launched on Tmall, right?
Correct.
And it was Tmall Global.
Yes.
And shout out to Mike for getting me earlier today when I wasn't trying to be dismissive about Canada. Obviously, it's in the first wave. We don't see that often. A lot of times it is kind of the Canada, UK, Australia. Although as you'll see throughout the day, Australia kind of shut down as well, and we'll see some data later on that. But tell us a little bit more about kind of the importance of kind of your Tmall partner, and just kind of how you guys launched, and any recommendations or things to be aware of for the audience.
Yeah, I'm sure June has a lot to say about this too, but for us, we did not have a team on the ground in China. We were running the business and launching the business from the US, so we needed people on the ground that we trusted, who we knew would be not just good operational partners, but also good shepherds of the brand. And then knowing that we were in a space that is regulated, we had to be very careful about who we picked. We wanted to pick someone who had experience with supplements, with regulated products, who knew what we could and could not say, and could mirror as much as possible our regulatory strategy in the US, which here we're very cautious. We want to make sure that we're always in the right and not treading into gray areas. In China, I think a lot of the potential partners we spoke to were more comfortable with the gray And for us, it was an element of, maybe we'll get there at some point, but right now we want to be as careful as possible. So the lesson I think that we learned is like there are a lot of TPs partners out there. There are a lot of marketing partners you can work with, a lot of TPs you can work with. And for me, like the biggest learning was you want someone who is invested in your brand and is shepherding your brand in this new country, because a lot of the time they're doing work that you might not even fully understand, or you might not be able to fully grasp because of the translation challenges, or that you don't understand the platforms as well as they do. I don't know if I'm allowed to give specific recommendations, but we've worked with a couple of both like marketing and operational partners who have been very supportive and great shepherds of our brand.
Yeah, and I should say that the conversation also extends off camera when,
Right.
When you leave the stage. So, Gina, I know you've talked a lot. I know at Manduka, Japan was a big market for you guys. Just, kind of maybe some of lessons learned, especially if you've moved from Manduka to, kind of a new brand.
Yeah, so China definitely is a huge market, and as Joy explained, it's a little more intricate, especially if you're trying to do Tmall Classic by yourself, which is where you go into China first, like directly without going through cross-border. I think to her point, picking a great Tmall partner, TP, is really crucial. But I would say if you don't already have a connection, there is always the cross-border option, so you can always look at that. From a revenue standpoint, however, Classic is much larger in terms of opportunity. So if you are able and have the right partners, I would say to explore that route. In terms of other countries in Asia, like Japan and Korea, people aren't as familiar with the platforms over there, but in Japan, Amazon's really gained a lot of traction and really almost over Rakuten at this point. Rakuten is kind of the primary platform that everyone was on, and we've seen a really big shift. And so those are the two that you'd want to look at. Again, there are partners that can help you get on board, both of them. You can actually do Amazon directly yourself, especially if you're a 3P store, it's not as complicated. In Korea, there's also a ton of platforms that you should be on, Naver, Coupang, etc. But yeah, I could go on and on.
Yeah, one thing, Joy, that we picked up on was the ability to test and learn. And I know you guys had maybe some assumptions about UK versus Canada that I don't know if it was really testing or more learning than testing, but walk us through a little bit of that. And then also Australia, typically, again, we're really trying to focus on the beauty, health, and wellness, and to your point, that brings in regulatory. Mm-hmm. So I know that was kind of a surprise not to hear that you went to Australia until we heard the story.
Yeah, so Australia, I think like any direct-to-consumer brand, we explored the markets where our current US marketing, we could leverage current US marketing first. So that's always Canada, the UK, and Australia. Australia, we realized, was going to be very difficult because it has one of the most stringent, the TGA, which is their version of the FDA, is one of the strictest regulatory bodies in the world. So a lot of times, actually, in other markets, they prefer products from Australia because they know it's been through this like very strict regulatory approval process. So for us, not having the time or the resources to go through that approval process, we decided to scrap Australia completely and focus on Canada because we knew that it was going to be like an easy way in given the marketing bleed, and also the UK because the UK has a less stringent regulatory approval process. So from the perspective of like testing and learning, we did a lot of work up front. We like really understood how much traffic was coming into our site from these two different countries, the UK and Canada. We understood how many requests we were getting on social media and from CX, and we basically benchmarked our initial performance spending $0 to those expectations. So we made some assumptions about like, we knew that this percentage of customers converted from the website to checkout, from checkout to completing checkout in the US. Does that also hold true for Canada if we were spending $0 at all just with organic traffic? With Canada, we actually saw that it performed better. Maybe there was enough latent demand there that in the first couple of months that we launched, people were just like hitting the website and purchasing and subscribing and not even thinking twice about subscribing. The other thing for us is we were offering free shipping to Canadian consumers, which Canadian consumers are probably not used to. So it was maybe one fewer barrier for them to click checkout and actually go through with it. The UK, we found, even from like a traffic and conversion perspective, just didn't meet the same levels that we expected, we had known from Canada and the US. So from very early on, we realized that to really go into the UK and get a foothold there, we would have to spend marketing dollars. The marketing would probably have to be specific to the UK. And we basically made a decision to focus more on going deeper into Canada before doing that in the UK. So a lot of that initial data, without spending a single dollar, you can figure out which markets already had enough latent demand that you should start spending some of your dollars and some of your energy and resources in.
Yeah, I got so caught up I wasn't even watching the clock. Ahmed, maybe come back to you. Again, we've heard Mexico, we've heard Middle East. Is that what you guys are seeing? I mean, it's what the data seem to suggest is, kind of where to go next, which is how I'd like to kind of to wrap this up. And I know, Joy, you had mentioned, looking at the Middle East as well. When you're talking, or kind of from your, air traffic control position, what are you guys seeing in general as people push beyond the tried and true?
Yeah, so definitely those are some of the markets that we're seeing the biggest growth in. And it's, for some brands, it's where to go next. For others, it's where to go deeper, right? To really do the Middle East right, if you're large enough, having a partner that can do it locally or can help you do it more local is going to drive significant growth for you in those markets and make them actually sizable markets for you. And it goes back to the marketing approach, the inventory approach, having potential set up there to be able to process payments a certain way. All those factors are going to be key. But the growth is definitely outpacing some of the other markets. So it's if you're not there, it's one to focus on entering. If you're there, it's okay, how do I look at multiples of this business in growth?
And that's definitely what we've heard. So I know we're over. Again, encourage you guys to walk up, introduce yourselves throughout the afternoon. We're going to take a lunch break now. We're going to get going back up here on stage around 2 o'clock. Jim and I will dive back into some of the data that you've seen. We'll talk a little bit about kind of where the next bets are. True Classic is going to give us an inspirational story of a D2C brand that has weathered all the headwinds and still continued to grow, and have a great afternoon program. So thank you guys for your attendance this morning, and thank you guys for joining us up on stage.
Thank you.